All right, we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our late but still happening September live stream. Jonah and I had some scheduling issues, and I don't know how much Jonah wants to talk about it, but Jonah has some exciting stuff that he's working on, or I don't know if it's top secret, but I am very excited for it. I'm really excited to have you all here. I'm excited for Jonah to be here. Today we have a lot of questions, and so we definitely had to prioritize, and that's probably going to be the memo going forward, to be honest. So we'll talk about that more as well today. But since we didn't do a Techlore Talks, Jonah and I definitely wanted to touch on kind of a few news stories that multiple people have been asking about. So we kind of figured that we'd combine those news stories into almost the questions you've been having and give you all our general thoughts on these things. So we're going to talk about the Linux vulnerability, the cups flaw, which is rated 9.9, I believe, as a vulnerability, which is almost as high as it goes. We're going to talk about some of the Windows recall stuff that they've changed. Telegram now we'll talk about that. Sharing IP addresses and phone numbers on legal requests, and then Mozilla and uBlock Origin stuff. And then we'll dive into the questions. As always, feel free to leave your questions along the way. If we have time at the end, we're going to go through and see how many more questions we can tackle. But we try to keep these around like an hour and a half, at the most 2 hours. It kind of depends on how things are going. But I think that's all I got. Did I miss anything, Jonah?
That sounds about right.
All right. So again, before we get to the questions, do you want to give us kind of a primer on this vulnerability, the Linux one?
Yeah, the Linux thing. So basically, it was something that was like going around on social media for like a week before it came out because the developer was like, I found this vulnerability that's rated 9.9, and they were kind of hyping it up. And there were some news articles that came out saying like all Linux machines are going to be impacted, like it's a huge flaw. Um, and it turned out to be a vulnerability in cups, which is the Linux printing driver. It's also a printing driver on Mac OS, and I don't know if Windows uses it. I'm not sure if the vulnerability exists on other platforms too. I think that they said they were looking into it, but it's a pretty benign thing for most people because like the majority of Linux, I mean, no Linux server is going to have cups on it probably unless it's a printing server, and most desktop users aren't going to be using it either for the most part. And I think it's only a certain configuration, and it basically requires you to have like a malicious printer installed and print something out from your computer. So it's definitely like a big flaw in this specific piece of software, but it's not like the end of the world bug that people were making it out to be in like the news and on social media, security communities, that kind of thing, because it is not something that impacts all Linux systems and everyone can be instantly hacked remotely with like remote code execution or anything like that. It's pretty benign stuff for the most part, which is I think what most people were expecting. It's extremely rare for any major vulnerabilities like that to come out. And since it wasn't like a perfect 10 on the CVE scale, it was probably like a result of a misconfiguration or a non-default configuration anyways. So it was, most people who like knew what they were talking about knew that it probably wasn't going to be a big deal, but it was just a weird situation where like they were talking about this imminent vulnerability for a really long time, kind of hyping it up on Twitter or whatever, which is usually where a lot of fun news comes from, I think, on the internet, Twitter.
You're telling me
So
this hyped up vulnerability on Twitter uh, was hyped up and was not all it cracked up to be?
yeah,
Color me
pretty much.
shocked. Um, but yeah, I'm seeing here at the bottom, and I have it on the screen. If you just want to double check, the mitigation measures, you can just make sure that cups. It sounds like you just disable or stop cups to kind of just make sure you're not affected by this. Are there plans, or have they already patched the issue itself in cups, or is it something that's unpatchable?
Um, I haven't seen the latest cups development from that. It's not something unpatchable, but I don't know if it has been fixed yet.
Okay,
So I'd have to look into that.
cool. All right, yeah. So good to know for anybody who uses Linux. I remember having to use cups once on my personal Linux machine for whatever reason. Um, it was. I mean, this was like probably a decade ago, so I don't remember why I was messing around with cups. I was having some issue with a printer or something, but um, That machine is somewhere in the world. I don't know where it is, so I'm good. I think I reinstalled Windows on it before I sold it. I do have. What do you feel about that? I feel weird about selling a machine with an operating system that it didn't come with. Because like when I'm selling something, I want it to be as close, because I take really good care of my stuff. Like I'm cleaning my devices every week. If there's like a little scratch on it, I try to like do what I can to repair it. So I don't know, I try my best to sell things as close to like mint new condition as possible. And I feel like the OS for me is part of that. But
Yeah, personally, I would do the same thing for the most part, but I always sell like relatively recent things. I don't keep like either I keep electronics forever or I sell like a laptop within like 5 years or something of it coming out. So it's not like gonna be horrible if it's using the stock operating system. I could see like installing a more lightweight operating system, for example, if it was like an ancient ThinkPad or something, because you can install like lightweight stuff for web browsing, that kind of thing.
mhm.
But yeah, I'm not gonna be going and selling like my old Pixel with like a custom ROM on it or something like that. It's just gonna be stock, and then it's obviously gonna be all unlocked, so they can do whatever they want with it when they buy it. That's kind of what I think.
Yeah, I saw there was a person who was selling a phone with a custom ROM recently on Craigslist, I believe. And I don't know why you'd expect anyone to know what any of these ROMs are who's like on the streets, just buying a phone on Craigslist. But
Right.
they put like the whole selling point, I think, for this listing was the fact that it was listed as a ROM. Because it was like the first photo and they're like, Pixel flashed with ROM. And they put in the description, it's flashed with the ROM. And then, the last sentence, I think I might have sent you this on Signal actually. They said, they said, stop asking me about the ROM. Look it up yourself. Do your own research. I'm like, what the hell? Like, why are you selling it? You're going to give people crap for asking about it. But anyway.
Yeah, that is weird because I was just about to say before you said that last part that I could see. For me, I would never do this because I just hate the process of selling things in general. So I want to get it over with. But I can see like if you wanted to use it as an educational point to like try and convince somebody that the operating system or ROM that you have installed is way better. I could see why maybe you'd try to advertise it like that. But I I do not want to bring privacy education into my buying and selling
Yeah,
processes personally.
that's so
I'm just
fair.
gonna.
Yeah, I'm just trying to stay alive, man. um, anyway, our next story, we don't want to take too much time on these. Um, Windows Recall. For those who missed it a long time ago, Windows tried to release this recall thing where essentially they take a snapshot of everything you do on your computer and they make it so that the OS can search through it and use AI. So you theoretically could do something like, when did I enter this web address into this browser? Like, give me the date. And pretty much your computer will be able to go back in time and tell you, oh, that happened on this day. It was released with really bad privacy and security just altogether. I mean, people ripped it to shreds. I think within a couple of days, someone already hacked it and were able to abuse it to pretty much install malware that was like extremely difficult to remove, if I remember that correctly. And the other issue is that it's just a Microsoft product, and most things that Microsoft touches just don't really respect privacy very well. So they actually announced that they were going to at least temporarily pause it before reintroducing it with new mitigations. And so this is kind of an update just to update people, update people on the recall feature. So now it will be opt-in, or at least it'll have the ability to opt out, from my understanding. And there are going to be some additional security features, like they're actually going to add some encryption to the way that it's stored so that random programs can't just access all of this data, which is something that we would have expected to see, like this type of privacy invasive software you'd expect to see isolated from the get-go. And it's crazy that it took them releasing it publicly to realize, oh, maybe we shouldn't release it this way. They also released some new features. And this, again, I'm kind of quoting this from the coverage I did with Nate on surveillance support based on what I remember. But they have a new feature now that tries to automatically detect sensitive information, and it'll exclude that. But as I said on that podcast, a Microsoft product working as intended, ... question mark, being able to recognize what you want personally identifiable information to be. Does that include birthdays? Does that include passwords, usernames, emails? I don't know, and neither do they. And here, it's right here. A sensitive content filter that attempts, might I add, to reduce passwords, national ID numbers, and credit card numbers from being stored in the recall. So yeah, I kind of wanted to just bring this up, talk about the updates, maybe get Jonah's takes on these. My take already is that the fact that it wasn't released with this is insane to me. I think that the needle is pushed so far to the terrible direction that any improvements make it seem like a more reasonable feature to roll out. But at the end of the day, it still has a ton of privacy and security implications. It's going to increase your attack surface no matter how you cut it. And I just can't find, honestly, even a use case for this feature for most people. And I feel like, especially for a corporate environment, I can't imagine anyone wanting to deal with this for like their company and their employees. So those are kind of my thoughts. But
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's no surprise. I think that Microsoft was going to bring this feature back from the dead eventually, even though it makes no sense whatsoever to have on your computer. It's good that it's opt-in though, and that you can simply ignore it if you want, which I would recommend everyone do, because I don't think you should support this kind of thing, and I don't think you should put yourself at risk of any of the privacy and security violations that this is going to bring, because it's still essentially going to log all this information in a centralized place at the end of the day, and that's going to be a big target for hackers. You know, Microsoft can add all the security measures they want, but you can't make something like this perfectly secure, because somebody has to be able to access this data, even if it's just you. And if you can access it, then there is a way for hackers to access it. It's just a matter of how difficult it is for them. But if the data is valuable enough, and it probably will be in this case, people will be determined to find a way to abuse the system, I think. So it's definitely something that still should not be used.
Yeah, I very much agree. And actually, I forgot to mention one thing. One of the best changes they made, actually, and I'll tell you why, is they have new strict hardware requirements, which is awesome because that includes some additional security protections, but like very few computers even support it. So this is probably
interesting.
Yeah, if you already bought your computer, there's a very good chance it might not work with this anyway. This is something that's definitely for like newer computers that are designed to be sold as, they're going to say compatible with Windows Recall, and everyone's going to be like, I don't know what that is, but they say it's compatible with this thing, and I guess I'll use it. I hope not.
I guess it'll be good to have like a sticker on things to avoid. That will be very convenient for shopping.
Yeah. I just hope it's not like the smart TV stuff, because every sticker now on TVs is smart TV, and I go, well, what's the one that doesn't have that sticker? And that's just not an option anymore. So
yeah, I think that'll be the case, unfortunately.
Yeah. Anyway, 2 more stories. We're almost done, and then we'll get into the questions. We wanted to touch on Telegram real quick. Been getting a lot of questions about this, and it's something I've already commented a lot about on our different platforms. Context: Telegram has always been kind of a problem in our eyes for privacy and security. Just to recap the general issues, they use their own crypto that isn't that vetted by the community. They have made improvements to MT Proto. It's MT Proto, right? MT Proto 2?
Yeah.
Thank you. They did make improvements to it that people were suggesting over time, so it did get better over time. But at the end of the day, end-to-end encryption was never enabled by default. Telegram advertises itself as being this extremely private, extremely secure messenger that you have to opt into. And secret chats are only supported on mobile devices, so you can't even use it on desktop. And at the end of the day, it still just has a lot of metadata concerns that even platforms like Signal, which don't offer the best anonymity, still provide those kind of protections. And I think the most harmful thing about Telegram is the lack of transparency and the fact that they are in a lot of ways advertising in a misleading way. When you brand yourself as a private messenger, but you don't even offer end-to-end encryption by default, those are not compatible in my head. And I don't think they're compatible with anybody who's trying to prioritize privacy. So some context: Telegram has published a transparency report, air quotes, for anyone listening to audio if we publish this later. It's been empty. They said previously that they've never submitted a single byte of data to governments, despite us actually covering stories on surveillance support that say otherwise, where they submit data to the Indian government or the Brazilian government or the German government. And those are all stories you can look up and see for yourself that they did submit data, but they never updated their transparency report. Flash forward, their CEO gets arrested in France. And now we're starting to see some changes. And now the stories are being told as Telegram now shares users' IP and phone numbers on legal requests. I'm here to tell you that's always been happening. The only difference is now they're having to be transparent about it and be honest about it. And it might be happening more often, but we already have stories of this happening in the past. And I just don't understand people who like Telegram and think that other platforms aren't trustworthy when Telegram straight up lied on its own website. Nate and I actually, before I hand it over to you, Jonah, Nate and I actually quickly checked out their site to see if it still said they've never handed over a single byte of data. And we have to maybe use the web archive, so I might do this after the live stream. But we both remembered the quote as, "We've never handed over a single byte of data to governments." Now it says we've never handed over a single byte of message data to governments. I think they updated the wording, but we need to check that out after the live stream. But yeah, I did check out the transparency report, and last I checked, which was a few days ago, it was still empty. So I just don't know why you'd ever use Telegram. You can actually look up court cases and see other messengers, and they are very transparent about the situations where they give over user data. I don't understand why people prefer a platform that lies about when it hands over user data versus a company like Proton, for example, very forwardly comes forward. They very proudly come forward and say, yeah, we did hand over this data. Here's what we handed over, and here's why we had to hand it over. So now you're actually educated and you know what can happen in certain situations for yourself. But I don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my thoughts, like on most things Telegram, it's pretty simple, so I don't have a lot to say. It's just not a great platform to be using. I tell people this all the time. It has a lot more in common with Twitter than Signal, for example, because it's used by a lot of people in pretty much the same way that Twitter accounts are, whether they're for sharing things in a group or Telegram channels where you're just sharing announcements for a project that you're working on. A lot of people in the crypto space, for example, use Telegram for some reason. And it's essentially, from that point of view, it's more of a social media platform than it is a messenger. There's a lot of public sharing functionality, and direct messages and especially end-to-end encryption is pretty much an afterthought, which is also the same as it is on Twitter, ironically, where they have end-to-end encrypted messages, but it's kind of hacked on, and you have to be I think you have to be a premium subscriber to use them. So it's kind of that sort of thing where security is clearly not their main concern. And so if you're using it as a secure messenger, that's a big problem. So, I mean, using Signal just makes a lot more sense for any of these sensitive communications, or using anything besides Telegram at this point. It seems like they're not only a poor solution technically, but they're also extremely not trustworthy. So there's so many reasons to just avoid this platform entirely.
Yeah, and we talk about Signal a lot because we're big fans of Signal, but most other messengers that advertise themselves as privacy focused are doing better than Telegram. I would, like Jonah said, I would be looking at Telegram as a social media platform and not as a private messenger. It's just not built with that kind of mindset. And for people who are wondering what I was talking about, I accidentally pulled up the wrong article. It's actually really hard to find these articles now because all new articles, when you type in Telegram handing over user data, have to do with this news story. But I just pulled up here on the stream from 2022. I might add here that they're reporting previously Telegram's policy limited sensitive user information sharing to cases involving terror suspects. First off, I don't even know. Here, I'm going to click this link here. Because I guess they're linking here, it's a web archive link, but it links to their privacy policy. So Telegram's own privacy policy used to state that they would hand over information to law enforcement authorities, but their transparency report never said that. it never reported these situations. You can never have any transparency into that, which is just insane. But it's also wrong because, again, their policy limited sensitive user information sharing to cases involving terrorist suspects. 2022. Here's a story. Indian court directs chat app Telegram to disclose details of copyright infringers. And they complied with it. They handed over the IP addresses and they handed over the information of the admins of certain channels. So it's a verifiable, easy to find info. But Telegram is social media, not private messaging. And if you are going to use Telegram for private messaging, make sure secret chats are enabled and know that it's a weird platform. And then I'll let you kind of do the last story here.
Yeah, the last story. It looks like uBlock Origin Lite is no longer available in the Mozilla extension store or add-on store. Basically, they ran into this issue where Mozilla was falsely flagging all of their extension submissions to the store as like not being privacy respecting, having no privacy policy, having like AI generated code, all sorts of weird warnings that the author of uBlock Origin Lite totally denied and was like, no, this is ridiculous that Mozilla basically delisted every version of the app except for the very first one for some reason. They kept the old version on, but with a warning on it. So it was a weird situation there where people were potentially at risk of not being able to update or that kind of thing. And Mozilla eventually like admitted that this was a mistake, and they accepted it back, but because of like all of this drama that was going on, that the developer of uBlock Origin essentially thought that it didn't really warrant a response. So he made the decision to delist it from the store himself. So it's no longer available on the Mozilla extension store. It's just available from like a self-hosted installer. So that's the way to get uBlock Origin Lite now. It doesn't affect uBlock Origin users at all. So I guess if you don't know the difference, uBlock Origin Lite is the Manifest v3 version of uBlock Origin, which is a bit more limited and uses new browser APIs to block things rather than the way that traditional uBlock Origin works. I don't think there were a lot of users of it on Firefox in the first place, most likely, because there isn't really a good reason to use it over the existing uBlock Origin extension for the most part, unless you're in a browser that you're forced to, like Chrome requiring Manifest v3, that kind of thing. So I don't think it's going to be a huge deal for people, but as this article on ghex.net that Jordan sent us points out at the bottom, a lot of these mistakes and like these automated review processes are made by machines and by like machine learning, AI, that kind of thing. And it wouldn't surprise me that like Mozilla is probably getting more into automating all this kind of stuff. It's going to make more mistakes. It's going to affect other extension developers. It's kind of just a mess in this review process because it prevents open source developers like this from releasing apps and extensions that a lot of people use. And it's important that these updates get out. So it's, to me, it's kind of crazy that there isn't like a human review process or anything like that. It's very non-obvious. You had to make like a big public complaint about the issue and leave the store entirely in order to get a response from Mozilla and get it fixed, a mistake that was ultimately on their end. So it's pretty much just drama, I think. But at the end of the day, uBlock Origin Lite isn't going to be available on the Mozilla store anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess in defense of Mozilla, I feel like this happens all the time with Apple and Google with the app stores.
Right.
So it seems like just...
I think it's equally ridiculous with them. This is my problem with Mozilla. Okay, let me come back here for a second. Mozilla is constantly moving in the direction of Apple and Google, exactly like this, in so many different ways. And that should not be their goal. It's very clear to me, I think, that Mozilla really wants to be a big tech company, but that is not what anyone wants from Mozilla. They need to be diverging in the opposite direction and get back to their roots. And I think that I've seen more comparisons to Apple and Google when it comes to Mozilla in like recent years than have ever been had before, and that is very problematic to me.
No, it's very fair.
It's not good.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's tough. I don't know if I have like the right to like on my end. I just feel weird thinking about like, well, what direction should Mozilla go. I feel like it's kind of their choice what direction they want to go. And I just don't I don't even understand the direction they're going, to be honest.
Right.
Because I agree, it seems like they're doing a lot of things that like more big tech companies would do, but then they'll randomly do something that totally goes against that. And I go, oh, so no? ... I don't know. Like I just they're just a weird organization, and it's just hard to really justify a lot of the decisions they make. But people like Firefox, I guess.
Yeah. It is nice. And that is the nice thing about Firefox in this story, especially, because if it's set up on Chrome, for example, there's really no recourse. But the fact that the developer is able to self-host an installer on
That's
their
cool.
own so that people can still get this update is a really huge benefit of Firefox. There's a lot of things that Firefox has going for it that it's just a shame that Mozilla constantly does a lot of other unrelated things that kind of mess with that whole brand.
Yeah, actually, I'm really curious. What are your thoughts on Zen browser? Have you looked into Zen browser much?
I haven't looked into it too much, no.
Oh, you should check
What
it
is that?
out, because I know you're a big fan of Firefox and you're a big fan of Arc. Zen is pretty much that. Zen is in alpha, and it's pretty much Arc, but based on Firefox. And it's not from just a single dude. I think it actually has a few team members. They actually have a proper site that explains the team, their development, their goals, their roadmap. And it looks like it's active on GitHub. I still obviously have long-term concerns about the sustainability of the project and all of that kind of stuff, and especially maintaining a browser and making sure the browser's maintained and kept up with security updates. And it's still in alpha, so it's not something I'm going to recommend to people. But it seems like a more like robust Firefox fork that could actually stick around. I'm not confident enough that it will, but like a lot more than Florp, which I think is still a thing for the record. But I think the hype's died down a little bit with Florp. So yeah, check it out.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks cool. Even I'm interested if I liked the Arc thing, but I don't really like the Arc thing. You actually know the reason why I don't like vertical tabs? And it's a really funny reason. I just hate it for content creation. If you have to edit videos and all your screenshots are off-centered, you now have to adjust X and Y axes for every single screenshot you take. And that's annoying. But if you have horizontal tabs, you just do a generic zoom in, and as long as the page is somewhat centered, aka it's not Wikipedia, then you're good. Any Wikipedia page is awful for like including videos, because it's like it's never centered, but it's super wide, and so if you zoom in, you lose the text context. It's really awkward, but yeah.
Can't you use the mobile Wikipedia on desktop?
You could, or I just use reader mode. I feel like reader modes. Yeah. I do think that is actually, someone just put this in the live chat right now. I think that is kind of what's a little sad. Oh my gosh, all my emojis popped up and ruined my preset. They beat Firefox to vertical tabs. Yeah, I think that's kind of sad. I'm not even a vertical tabs person, but I know it's like a new thing, and pretty much every browser nowadays, I think even Brave, right? Brave has support for vertical tabs. It's not a default, but I think you can enable it. I think. I don't use it. But
it's definitely not a new thing. I know a lot of like old browsers used it because I remember like 10, 15 years
is what
ago.
I'm trying to say.
I know. Well, I feel like Firefox might have had it before and it was removed. I feel like 15 years ago there was like a very small vocal minority of people who loved vertical tabs, and then everyone was kind of like, no, go away.
That was just
and
a
now
dream.
It's making a comeback.
That was just a dream that you never woke up from. And now it's back with Zen. But yeah, all right. And now to the questions, the actual Q&A. Wow.
Sweet.
So some announcements. We started a new thing on our forum because we wanted a new way to support you all, to support us. We wanted a way for people who especially love the forum to kind of have extra perks on the forum. And we also wanted a way for people to be able to like recurringly be a part of what we're doing without Patreon. And so we actually rolled out our own membership on the forum. And it's called a Techlorian. So if you want to be a Techlorian, that's how you do it. You get access to our Signal group as well. If you join that, you just DM me on the forum and I let you in Signal. And that way you go directly through us and we don't have to go with your Patreon. It's more privacy respecting than Patreon. And you also get fun badges and stuff. So we're going to start with our Techlorians and our patrons. And then we have one question on XMR chat, which I'll touch on as well. And then we'll go ahead and see what we have time for from there. So first question, do you want to ask it?
Oh, I was just going to say, maybe you should do XMR chat first, so you don't forget.
Okay, yeah, because it's just one. So we'll do XMR chat. Pretty much Jamie asked us on XMR chat, are you planning to review SimpleX? And I guess for people who don't know, XMR chat is a way that you can tip us, kind of like a live chat here on YouTube, but you do it with Monero. So you just put in your name, you put in how much you want to give in Monero, and then you enter a message, and then your message pops up here on the right. So it's a really good way, and it's one time. So next Q&A, you can go ahead and leave us a tip here, and we'll answer your question here. But are you planning to review SimpleX, and have you recently considered recommending it? This was actually done, and this was asked right before we listed SimpleX on our website. So if you look on our website right now at techlore.tech/resources, SimpleX is there. I know Jonah's probably been wanting it to be listed for a long time, but I had a few more, like, I want to wait it out and see thoughts about it. But it's been around for a long time. They've been maintaining it. They've been developing it very well, and they've been introducing new features, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. So it's listed on the site. As for a review, there's no plans on it on my end right now for a review. But it's definitely something that I should do and I want to do in the future. There's just a lot of things to review. The more pressing upcoming review I want to do is I still don't know how to say it. Kagi, K-A...
Yeah, the search engine.
The search engine, yeah. That is like more pressing on my end because I just really want to push that out. I've been wanting to do that for a while. But yeah, are you still using SimpleX?
I mean, I use it. There aren't a lot of people that use it, so it's like it's a very niche tool. But for people who want to message me on SimpleX, I have it available. I think we talked about SimpleX a few live streams ago, and we talked about basically this whole thing where like Techlore can't make recommendations willy-nilly because they're going to last forever. Yeah. I'm wondering, was there anything specific about SimpleX recently that made you decide to list it, or was it just like a matter of time?
No, it really was just a matter of time. It was seeing that they were still active, seeing that they were still involved, seeing that they still had updates coming out, and it really was like, okay, yeah, like a few people all asked in the same week, and it kind of just brought it back to like the front of my mind, and I just checked them out again, and then I was like, I'm getting to the point where I can't justify my position anymore on this, and it's time to like evolve that position.
Right.
So that's kind of the thought process there. Yeah, and someone asked about Threema in the live chat right now. The only reason Threema is not listed, I think Threema is great. I don't like the fact that it's paid. That's really it. That's the one reason. And if you don't have an issue with that and your contacts don't have an issue with that, Threema is fantastic. Our resources are designed for people who are like getting into privacy and security for the first time. And I think that if they saw a paid messenger when all the other ones are free, it's a little bit off-putting, I think. But I actually really respect the business model at the same time. I think it's really cool that they require payment. It's a more sustainable business model, personally, I think, than VC funding. And I really enjoy that Threema has that business model. But it just makes it hard to recommend because like I can't imagine the friction points required to get someone to use a paid messenger. It's already hard enough to convince people to use really nice free messengers. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like a paid search engine is one thing, but like with messengers, and we talked about this before as well, the network effect when it comes to like messengers in general is why it's so hard to recommend anything except like the biggest ones in the space, because it's a matter of like trying to get as many people as possible to use anything private rather than a specific messenger.
Right.
I would say I've heard the argument. I've never used Threema myself. I've been kind of convinced to check it out lately because, I mean, it comes up a lot. There's definitely a lot of people who like it, and I think it's a good argument that like Signal in most cases really requires even more of an investment than Threema does. Because of the phone number requirement. And it's easy to like just take it as granted for free if you already have a phone number. And a lot of people do
That's
have a
fair.
phone number because you kind of need one. But at the same time, a lot of people don't have a phone number or can't get one super easily. And then they have to, go and get like a prepaid SIM from the store or something like that to register for an account. And it is an investment for a lot of people. And I think that like especially outside of countries like the US, I think it's more of an issue. So I've seen the argument from people that it's actually cheaper to use Threema than
That's very
Signal,
fair.
and that's why they use it. And that's something that I've been thinking about lately, and it's kind of why I'm convinced to check it out again. But
Yeah, no, that's a really
I don't know
valid
if you've
argument.
ever thought about that.
Yeah, very valid argument. And I mean, there's no phone plan that's um, like a one-time purchase. So
Right.
you are committing to a subscription when you use Signal. But I think for most people, especially myself, and I can't imagine anyone else I know, they're going to be using a phone number. So it is effectively free because it's kind of combined with something else. But I totally agree. If you're someone who doesn't want or doesn't have a phone number, then that makes a ton of sense. I think it's a really compelling argument. Um, so our question from our Techlorian, and they're an early Techlorian. Did you do that? That's really cool.
Oh, yeah, if you sign up, let me double check really quick. If you sign up by the end of this year, you get a badge on the form, and then you can select
Hey,
that as your title.
hell yeah.
So
Okay. And then no
be an
more
early
earlies.
supporter.
Yeah, no more earlies.
Yeah,
So that's cool.
end of the year.
Okay, I didn't know you did that. That's cool. I have some new accounts where the only way to use 2FA is via SMS, which I'm not too happy about. Since I live in Europe, they don't have access to services like MySudo, and they're reluctant to share their real phone number. Proton recently stated they're planning to implement phone number masking in Proton Pass, which would be a great option. Since they use long and random passwords for everything, they feel pretty safe without 2FA, but they're not sure if SMS 2FA would be in this situation worth the trade-off, giving out the real number to these services, even if it does offer added security. How would you approach this? Um, on my end, I think it really depends on the account. If it's an account that's not super sensitive and security is less of an issue, pretty much the thought process I would go through is, okay, if this account were to be hacked, what would this jeopardize in my life? If it's something like, I don't know, if I have like an Injure account that I upload public photos to, and it uses I'm not saying this is the 2FA method for Injure, I'm just pretending. But if it's just SMS 2FA, I don't really give a crap. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm not going to upload my phone number just for the sake of SMS 2FA. But if it's a bank account, I do think that you should try to maximize security everywhere you can with a bank account. And I think, maybe if you don't keep much money in a bank account, but also something to consider, if someone's able to get into your bank account, they might get access to a lot of other personal information as well. So even if privacy is your concern, sometimes that loss of security could impact your privacy at the end of the day. So it's a really hard situation. I hate SMS 2FA with a passion. I just generally don't like phone numbers with a passion. I know that's ironic given what we just talked about with Signal and kind of the limitations with Signal requiring a phone number. But I think for those sensitive accounts, I'd definitely encourage enabling it until there's a better option. And I just think it sucks that there aren't better phone number services in Europe for you to utilize that at least I'm familiar with. So that's what I got.
Yeah, the other thing from it depends on the account perspective is that um there are some accounts where when you add like a phone number for 2FA, for example, it adds that phone number as a recovery method for the account in general.
Mm,
And in that case, it can actually make your security less safe because you could potentially like uh, only have that SMS or that phone number like protecting your account when it comes to like having a support agent reset your password or something like that. So you can reduce your security in certain cases when you add SMS. So looking into like how that works and avoiding that is probably more important. I also think that like the benefits of 2FA are um, a lot smaller if you like you said use login random passwords for everything stored in a password manager. As long as you're actually doing that and it's completely unique, the the benefit for 2F of 2FA for you is less than it is for most people. So I don't think it's the end of the world if you don't use uh, SMS 2FA in that specific situation. But yeah, definitely like look into how it works. If it is like truly just used for 2FA and you still need that username and password to do everything else, then it shouldn't be harmful. But in other cases, it can be. So it really comes down to like a case by case basis.
Yeah, all really good points. I think if it were me and I lived in Europe, because I know that there aren't like aliasing services necessarily in many places in Europe because a lot of them are KYC'd. But if it were me, and this would definitely be an issue I'd stumble on because I'm sure most banks still require SMS 2FA, I would be committing to getting a second, even if it's KYC number, but ideally one that can exist online. And that has its own like proper 2FA, kind of like what Google Voice would offer you in the States essentially, because Google Voice would offer you this like pretty much SIM swap free experience. You don't have to worry about as many security issues with the SMS aspect of it with Google Voice. And that's something that you can use that's dedicated for just these random accounts that use SMS 2FA. I think that should resolve most of the concerns with like the SMS aspect, increasing security issues, and also you still getting to benefit from the security of 2FA in general without jeopardizing privacy quite as much. But I understand that's a financial commitment and now you have to manage 2 phone numbers. But I don't know specific services in Europe that do this, but I definitely know there are digital services out there, kind of like Google Voice. They are most likely going to be KYC'd, but at least you have kind of a second number to utilize. So I guess the next question is if services will take it. So I hope they do. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to jump down to the next question here from a patron. It looks like it's from Clem on the forum. Clem asked, do you know any good budgeting apps that respect your privacy and have good security? I currently use You Need a Budget with my significant other. Might be a good question for you. I actually don't know of any myself.
Yeah, I kind of went down this rabbit hole a few months ago. I actually tried out You Need a Budget as well. And for the record, I wasn't particularly impressed with their privacy more than anyone else. But I did like the fact that You Need a Budget is a paid service. And this is one of those situations where the fact the service is paid and has a decent privacy policy makes me more trustworthy that they're not in the business of just selling your data, which a lot of the free services that offer this kind of service do. I think that really, the only thing I could find that actually was privacy respecting that really didn't have any concerns or red flags was GNU Cache. But then you have to use GNU Cache. And just go to the website and you'll know what I'm talking about. Or I'll pull up the site too if you really. And again, if it works for you, actually Nate uses GNU Cache from surveillance support. He has no issues with it. And so if you're somebody who doesn't mind stuff like this, then that's great. But like, it's, I'm showing the website now. It's just not the prettiest thing to use. I think it's a lot more DIY. You have to really configure it and set it up to work the way you want it to work. And I don't consider this to be like an alternative to You Need a Budget. I consider this to be more of an alternative to like generic accounting software that maybe was popular like 10 years ago. But I think that's the way to do it. Another alternative, I did find a lot of offline manual options that allow you to like upload your statements or like a CSV file each month. But those are also really manual. But those are probably the most privacy respecting ways to go. So those are kind of my general thoughts. I don't actually think, I know it's interesting, but if you trust the provider itself to not be selling your transaction data, there's not a huge amount of like additional privacy risk because it's just fetching data from accounts that already collect the data, if that makes sense. So it's not generating new sets of data inherently. So that's kind of what I'd be thinking about. If you're comfortable with You Need a Budget getting data from your bank accounts and your bank statements and whatever you link to it, then that's fine. Obviously, you need to balance this with your needs and your financial life, which I don't know, and I don't know what your SO needs as well. But if you do use You Need a Budget, make sure to go into the privacy settings, opt out of anything there. Make sure you have 2FA on the account. Make sure you use strong, unique passwords and all that good stuff. But that's really all I have. There's not like one great service I've found that completely replaces it with a strong emphasis on privacy. So, yeah.
That'd be cool though. Someone should make that.
Someone
You're
should make
listening.
that. I agree. It'd be really cool. Um, Next question is also from a Techlorian, Fire Dragon. How come they don't get the early thing? They have to choose early, I assume?
They, it's an option in your profile.
Okay.
They could if they want.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Okay. They have two questions. They managed to switch most contacts to Signal. Good for you. And it's now their primary messenger. They have one contact that doesn't want to switch to Signal. They have to use WhatsApp to message her as they don't really enjoy it. They already sandbox WhatsApp. Her argument is simple. I don't want another app on my phone and I want to stay with WhatsApp. What are good arguments I can use to convince her? And if I can't, can I do any extra measures with WhatsApp to make it rather more private? Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I mean, I wonder what like the overlap is with like your context and her context, because if a lot of the people you talk to are the same as the people that um she talks to, then they're probably also on Signal, and a lot of like the chats that your mom has on WhatsApp with people, for example, could be moved to Signal without really any hassle on her end because people are already there because you've already done that work, right? So I think that's the biggest thing. It's like keeping a network of people in one place. And especially if you can get more people to not only talk to you on Signal, but talk to each other on Signal as well, that really like boosts the network effect of Signal in your community overall. And that's also going to probably help get more people to use Signal in the future. So it's something that you could definitely try and push for if that's a possibility. That'd be the main thing, I would think. But it really depends on your situation.
Yeah. My initial thought reading this was one way to I think maybe go about it or how I would go about it is her whole point is I don't want another app on my phone and I want to stay with WhatsApp. But in a lot of ways that's probably your argument too, right? Like you don't want another messenger app on your phone, you want them to use Signal. So I think you both actually in many ways
Right.
have the same argument. Um, and she's probably not quite as concerned about the privacy side of it as you are. So I don't know. I think at the end of the day, in situations like this, someone's going to have to give because both people want the same thing. And so I would, I'm just going to tell you right now, if you're only using WhatsApp with one person and you have WhatsApp in a work profile and you denied it permissions, outside of it taking up space on your phone and just the fact that, yeah, you're going to have to open WhatsApp here and there, there's not a huge issue with that because you've already kind of acknowledged the fact that WhatsApp isn't the most private platform, and you already migrated probably most of your sensitive conversations to Signal. Not everything's all or nothing. So I think you've already got a lot of benefit there. On the other hand, I think that it's no big deal for her to maybe also have an extra app on her phone too, because that's what you're doing for her. So yeah, I would just say like maybe I don't know what kind of discussions you've had around it, but just having like a very forward talk about it where you're just really honest about like, hey, it would just mean a lot to me. And it's one less thing to worry about in terms of like how I navigate communication between different people. And I want to make sure I'm up to date with you as much as I can. And it would really help me stay updated with you. That's how I'd go about it. But to each their own. I don't know like the relationship you have with your mom and like what that looks like. So yeah, my argument would be just talk about it and just express how much you want them to just use a different app because that's what you're doing with them right now, right? You have Signal when you have to use WhatsApp to talk with them. So I'd flip the argument and say that's what I'm doing with you right now and I don't like it. So yeah, and I think the second question's for you. Oh yeah, I'll ask it because it's for you. This is for you, Jonah. I use AdGuard Home along with my NAS instead of NextDNS. How much more fingerprintable is it to use multiple DNS servers for redundancy online? For example, use Molvad's encrypted DNS as well as Quad9, or is it simply just better to use Unbound to contact the root servers directly? Kind of seems to trade blows here for privacy. I already use Molvad to tunnel all the DNS queries to prevent my ISP from seeing them. I'm really glad that one's chucked at Jonah.
Yeah, I mean it really depends on like the privacy policies of the DNS providers that you're using because ultimately they're going to be getting your query information. And I think that Quad9 and Molbit encrypted DNS are going to be fine choices. It's possible to like when it comes to fingerprinting, it's potentially possible for like a website to figure out what DNS resolver you're using. But I mean, if you're using a popular one like that, that's not really a huge risk on your end. And your other question of whether it's better to like set up a DNS resolver, like unbound yourself to contact the root servers directly, that's probably worse for your privacy than it is to use like a secure and encrypted DNS provider like Quad9. Because the way that DNS works, basically, the root DNS servers don't know everything about DNS, for example. So if you're going to go to my website, you would ask and you had like a self-hosted DNS setup, your server would ask, like JohnnyO basically is my domain, and you would go ask the root servers. They would say, oh, you have to check the .com DNS name servers to see where that information is. So then you ask the .com DNS name servers, and they say, oh, you have to ask Jonah servers to see where it is, and then you're contacting my servers to figure out that information. And depending on the websites you visit, because you're making a connection directly to the website in question, the name servers that they operate, they could potentially use that to attack your privacy in certain ways. They could fingerprint you by like, say I could serve you a different DNS record to your IP address than somebody else in order to fingerprint you for some reason. I don't know like why anyone would do that or whether that's super common, but that's something to think about when you're doing it all yourself. You're really like querying all of these different servers constantly directly, whereas with Quad9, for example, your queries are getting mixed in with a whole pool of users that are using Quad9, and also most likely Quad9 has those DNS results cached on their end. So if you use Quad9 to like figure out the address for my website, for example, you might not have to contact the DNS servers that I run directly because Quad9 already has that information cached on their end. So it reduces like the number of connections overall, and you're sharing all of that information with a pool of other users. So it probably makes a lot more sense for most people to just stick with like trusted DNS resolvers. And if you're using like encryption with DNS, or if you're using Molvad to tunnel those queries so that your ISP can't see them, or if you're doing both of those things, that's probably going to be a pretty good situation for you as far as privacy goes. So I think the way you have it set up is perfectly fine for pretty much all situations.
Yeah, someone asked.
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. It sure does. Anyway, Fire Dragon, if anything Jonah didn't make sense, if anything Jonah said didn't make sense, just ping us on the forum or on Signal in the Signal group. Yeah. Again, if you want to join our Signal group, you can now do that by being a Techlore on our forum or by joining us on Patreon. So now we offer that in 2 areas, so you don't only have to use Patreon. So yeah, love the Signal group. Someone asked about Control D, just in general, and Control D seems really cool, and I want to review it soon. That's another one of the reviews I want to do soon. So yeah. Do we want to tackle regulars now?
All right, or we can just go in order to keep it simple, less jumping around.
Okay.
It starts with regular anyways. I think this question is more aimed at you, so I'll ask it. At what point, Dallas MZPS, at what point and or under what circumstances did you start feeling confident enough about your digital privacy and security or know how to feel comfortable and confident to begin charging people for coaching or providing people with solutions from your own learnings? Did you go to school related to this field, and how did you get to where you are with all that you do and know with privacy education?
Yeah, I'd say I didn't start with coaching. I just started with kind of sharing my own experience, which I think anyone can do. So that doesn't require any kind of expertise. And actually, in a lot of ways, that's more helpful than even what we do. Like a good example of that is the Privacy Dad. It's a blog, and the Privacy Dad is, I think, somewhat new, or at least new-ish to the privacy scene. But like that's the whole value of it, is the fact that they're trying to navigate privacy in their life, and they're trying to navigate what it looks like with their kids, and just being a dad who cares about privacy, if that makes sense. So that personal touch of someone going on their journey, I think, is actually really helpful. And that's kind of how the channel started. It's me trying to figure out things for myself and kind of sharing what I learned along the way. Now it's kind of become a little bit more like, here's what we feel is best, and giving recommendations as I've kind of gained more confidence as to like what works for people and what doesn't work for people. And I'd say that confidence has come from like a lot of our community's like, no, this is good, this is not good, and kind of like learning from what people criticize and what people don't criticize over time has been very helpful and kind of like steering me in the right direction. And then in terms of coaching, it's literally like the countless requests. Like I'd say almost daily, someone sends an email of like, I have this question and I trust you to answer it. And I like the way you think about things and you seem like you know what you're talking about. And so the more questions I was getting, the more I'm like, okay, I can't get back to every question. So if you ever try to emailing us a question, you'll know what that response looks like. I just kind of send a template, sadly, and it's like, oh, hey, like I'd love to get back to you, but that's why we have the forum so that I don't have to get back to every question. And then that's why we also have coaching. So yeah, I'd say overall it's very steered by the community and what the community has kind of wanted over the years. And no, I don't have any like formal expertise in this area. You know, a lot of it's personal experience, it's self-learning and just learning as I go. And it's nothing that no one else listening can't do. And it's part of the reason why I say everyone should try to go on a journey too, because I think we need more people to share their journeys and to make it more personable and make it more public for other people, which is ironic because it's about privacy, but you can still talk about privacy in a public way and maintain your own privacy. So yeah, I've also been in it for 10 years. I think if you're like involved in something for like 10 years, I think you just pick up a lot as you go. So yeah, is there anything you feel like I missed there?
No, don't think so.
Yeah. Next question for either of you. Why are Fediverse alternative social media platforms like PeerTube, Mastodon, and Lemmy not catching on with much mainstream users? Do you have thoughts on that?
You know, well, I mean, those platforms are very different from each other. I know why PeerTube isn't catching on with anyone, and it's because there is no the amount of effort that it takes to make even the most simple video, even a simple unedited recording, is more than it takes to like post a tweet, you know, off the top of your head, for example. And the reason that YouTube is so gigantic and really the only player in the online video space for like independent creators is because there is some return in value for the people who are investing their time to make content for the YouTube platform. And PeerTube doesn't have that. It won't have that until you're like a huge creator who like gets income from other sources like Patreon, for example. So that's something that like Techlore is able to do, for example, kind of as a benefit to the community. We can host things on PeerTube, but it's because Techlore is already huge on YouTube and already makes income from like other sources that can kind of subsidize that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, anyone on PeerTube is basically subsidizing the experience for the benefit of their community. It's not really a viable alternative platform for YouTube. So it's not going to really catch on in the same way that YouTube has.
Yeah.
As far as, yeah, I don't know if you have more to add about that.
Yeah, if you, sorry, this might be a whole tangent on just PeerTube actually, but yeah, like we have to host our own videos. We have to pay for the hosting on PeerTube. So it's not like it's magically this like open source alternative to YouTube. Like people have to pay for it. And so, yeah, like Jonah was saying, like it's something we pay for monthly to host. Jonah hosts it with his servers. And then like you'll see that I support, I think either Privacy Guides or Jonah on GitHub through the Techlore account. And that's like how we're paying for PeerTube. And the other thing too is, I don't know, it's just really interesting. I guess this is where it's going to tie into the other things. I sent a little stat to you recently on Signal. Well, before I get to that, I find it really funny that you bring up the effort thing, because I feel like that until you actually make YouTube videos, I feel like it's hard to see the amount of effort that it takes to make them. And it's something that I wish more people experienced. But I sent you a little chart, like a social media chart, and pretty much what it was the amount that people enjoy different social media platforms, specifically Gen Z or millennials? It was a younger...
I think it's Gen Z.
Yeah.
Maybe.
How much Gen Z enjoys every social media platform. YouTube was the most enjoyed platform. More than Netflix. Netflix was the second most enjoyed. And then it pretty much devolves all the way to like TikTok and Twitter. I think Twitter was the worst. And what we kind of noticed was the general pattern was the amount of effort required to produce content for each platform was almost completely correlated with how much people enjoyed the platform. And I feel like the fact that YouTube requires so much effort, so much time commitment, someone can't just put out like some nonsense in a minute or less or 10 seconds, right? They actually need to put time into planning out a video, figuring out how they're going to present the video, recording the video, editing the video, publishing the video. And then it has to be a good enough video that people actually want to watch it. So YouTube just takes a lot more work than these other platforms. And like Jonah was saying, I can't imagine somebody going through all that effort just for nothing and just posting it on PeerTube, where they're not going to get either the exposure they want or kind of like the return on investment that they want. And I say return on investment because people have limited time in a day. A lot of people have full-time jobs, and you can't expect them to ever like sustainably keep up their channels only on PeerTube if they're getting started on PeerTube. So I just want to really echo a lot of what Jonah said. I wish there was a way. I think the best bet for PeerTube is if like tons of major creators all hop to PeerTube and it becomes a normalized thing. And even then, I think a lot of creators wouldn't move to it if there's no monetization model. So, yeah, sorry to interject.
Yeah, sorry. Also, sorry if any of you can hear this siren going on in the background. It's
I think
it's a Minnesota thing. I don't know if it's picking up, but they're running all the tornado sirens right now. No, I mean, yeah, that level of effort thing is really, I mean, that's a famous concept in like computer science, for example. You'll hear this phrase garbage in, garbage out, where it's like, you know, you can't get any value out of something if you're not putting anything in it to begin with. And that really is the case for, I think, Twitter especially. You can really tell that like the people who are putting content onto Twitter is really shaping how people experience Twitter in a lot of ways. And it's pretty negative.
Yeah.
But moving on from like PeerTube, as far as like the other alternatives, I feel like Mastodon, it's kind of found like a niche of people. I know a lot of people who do use it regularly, but I think a big part of it too is that, like for better or for worse, I think that video is really so much, video and photo is really so much bigger than text-based social media for like younger generations especially. And I think that the way that social media platforms really take off is when like the younger generations, like even younger than me, like teenagers, for example, or like even younger than that, really start using these platforms. Like TikTok, for example, was really started because it was like it was Musically before it was TikTok, and it was basically a thing where like 14-year-olds were singing along to pre-recorded music, and then it evolved into this giant like general video sharing platform basically. And Facebook is kind of a similar thing where it's like it really started in like the college age group of people and like at specific college campuses, and then it really grew into like this thing that a lot of old people use now. I'm not calling you a boomer if you use Facebook, but you might be. But it's that's kind of like the progression of this sort of thing. And I don't think that like just pure alternatives to the existing platforms are super enticing for most people, because Mastodon is basically the exact same experience as Twitter. It's just better, but I don't think enough people care about that. Like people are kind of stuck in their ways at this point, and if you're already on Twitter, it's really hard to get you to switch. And if it's not adding really anything new from an experience perspective, if the experience is exactly the same and it's just technically better, people aren't going to care. So it's kind of unfortunate, but I think that it's probably the reason that the only reason that Mastodon like really took off like a year ago was because like Twitter was basically shut down. And I think that that's what it would really take for it to catch on with the mainstream, is if like Twitter went away, I think you'd see a huge resurgence in Mastodon, for example. But as long as it's still up and hasn't burned down yet, I think that Twitter's still going to be around just because it has a lot of staying power, basically.
Yeah, I would say another factor just to add on to this, and it's not one I enjoy. I think there's something to be said about platforms that are designed from the ground up to capture your attention versus the ones that are not. Mm-hmm. And what that means for the general networking effect of that platform. And what I mean by that is platforms like Facebook, even Twitter, and even YouTube are kind of designed to capture your attention as much as possible within the platform. And the more time that you're spending on the platform, the more likely it is that people you know are going to be on the platform. If you're watching YouTube all the time, the more likely it is that like when you're having lunch with a coworker, they're going to be seeing you use it and they're going to want to check it out as well, or you're just going to be talking about it more. It's going to be on your mind more. And I feel like Mastodon doesn't have algorithms. It just doesn't do any of the stuff that other social media platforms have. And I feel like it's competing against something that's meant to be a lot more addictive. It's like trying to sell a banana at a candy fair. Like, no one's going to go for it. So I do think that there's something to be said about the nature of the platform as well. And it's something that we see on the forum as well, like on the Techlore forum. People check and they leave, which I think is perfect for the record. Like, I'm fine with that because I want people to have a good relationship with technology. And the fact that people come in, they just get the updates they need, and then they pop off is awesome. And then if you can engage in something that you know about, perfect. That's exactly what I want for the platform. But we could like totally make the forum like algorithmically generated. If you click this post, we'll start throwing pop-ups at you, and then we'll try to like an infinite scrolling loop probably at the end of each post that automatically takes you to the next post. And then you're on the forum for as long as possible, and then we probably have a much better engagement on the forum. But my point is, like, that's not something I want to do. That's not something that Mastodon wants to do because these platforms care just a lot more about the user experience. So I think that is a factor working against them in terms of the networking effect, actually. And it's not a bad thing.
It really, really related to that. I feel like it's important to keep in mind that like social media, I think, has conditioned us to like really want big numbers when it comes to things. We want to see a lot of users doing things. We want to see a lot of posts, but that's not necessarily how it has to be. And I don't think it's actually worse to have less people using a platform if like the quality is higher and you can use it more intentionally, because it's exactly like you said, you don't have to spend all day every day on Mastodon, for example. I have a much better experience on it because I just follow like small group of people who post about things that I want to see, and I don't need to constantly be like barraged with everything else going on in the world, like Twitter would do, for example, with all the news going on and all the trending topics and that kind of thing. I just can focus on posts from a specific set of people, and Mastodon works perfectly for that. And that is not a bad thing. And it means that I'll never use Mastodon in the same way that I might have used Twitter, for example. And I'm never going to be following a ton of people. I'm never going to be making content for like a huge amount of people either on these platforms. But I don't think that that makes them worse. It's just a different experience than traditional social media. And I think it's also perfectly fine the way it is right now.
Yeah.
But there are some people I would like to join that on.
Yeah. And just a very, very quick mini rant. Someone said you can always use threads as an alternative. Look, I don't care how good Threads is right now. That's not what I care about, because every new Facebook platform is good and it starts good, and that's how they get people on the platform. With a flick of a switch, it's just not going to be that way anymore. Instagram used to be the clean, polished version of Facebook where it was more focused and it was a lot more wholesome, and that's what Threads is. Oh, someone said that was a joke, Henry. Well, you triggered me real well, so good job. The person who said you can use Threads. But yeah, I'm just very critical of people who say that Threads is a good alternative to Twitter, because I think the way that Threads is going to go is going to be the same thing as Twitter. It's going to eventually have to be like an ultra monetized platform that's too algorithmic, and it will prioritize like this like user experience and the quality that we're talking about. So
yeah, I mean, it has to be. There's no other way Facebook can afford to run Threads. Yeah. I mean, it's a huge platform and it's completletely centralized.
Yeah,
you have
give me a
things like Mastodon.
Sorry.
Hunter needs the tone indicators, everyone. Include them on all your messages.
Oh God. Here, I'll just I think we beat that one to death. Jonah, what's your favorite Apple product to ever release?
Oh boy, to ever release. Wow. I mean, in terms of like what I use the most,
Magic Mouse?
certainly the Magic Mouse. Yeah, I love the Magic Mouse. It just feels so nice in the hand,
so ergonomic,
and it works with all of my computers. Yeah, it's a wonderful product. I love it a lot. No, I would say like the MacBook Pro, Apple Silicon has really like changed the way I even use computers in general, which is kind of crazy, and it's annoying to me because I kind of want to switch back to Linux as a main computer. I still just use cubes on my ThinkPad, but kind of as a secondary device. And um, switching would be nice, but there isn't a lot of hardware that competes right now, and I'm really hopeful that that'll change in the next year or two with other ARM processors coming out that'll maybe make the Linux experience better on other devices. But in terms of like just what I like the most, I would have to say the Apple Watch is probably my favorite product. And uh, it's really convenient to like have it and well, first of all, I just like keeping track of steps and stuff, so that's one thing. But also to have it for notifications and just turn off all notifications except for like instant messages is really nice. And I know that I've told Henry about like this workflow that I have, and I don't know if you still do it because you got an Apple Watch, but to basically like have the option to leave your phone behind. And I don't even make use of that option a lot of the times, but it's super nice to have the option to leave your phone behind, just have the Apple Watch. It makes a lot more sense to me as a device and a form factor than something like the Lite phone, for example, as a secondary device. That makes a lot less sense to me than an Apple Watch, for example. So just having that option to kind of have this minimal device that I can just use for calling and texting on the go without having to bring my phone everywhere is super nice. And yeah, I just like the product. So that's probably the Apple product I've stuck with the longest, I think,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
I mean, Apple Silicon is just, in many ways, I feel like a good, just solid answer. And that's what I was gonna say as well. I know it's for Jonah, but I just have to like upvote what you say here because I made a little bit of a gamble in like 2018, 2019. I was using um, a mixture of Windows and Linux for producing Techlore content on a desktop device. And then I was tired of having to have a laptop and a desktop because I also, one of them, pretty much I had a work laptop, a personal laptop, and then kind of a desktop that was both personal and work. But it was just really hard to navigate um, because you have to update the operating systems for everything. You have to somehow sync video files between everything. I didn't have the NAS back then, and I think if I had a NAS, it would have made things a lot easier, to be honest, because then I could just keep all the data in one place, and I don't have to worry about transferring data all the time. But long story short, I took the risk, and I got the 2019 MacBook Pro, and I didn't love it. Like, I really did not like it. Like, it competed against my desktop, so the performance wasn't bad for video editing and everything that I do for Techlore, but it always just burned up. It was hot as hell. The battery would last for like an hour or 2 hours when I'm editing on the go, and it just felt like kind of a worthless device. And the context was I was hoping this would replace the need for a desktop so I could consolidate work devices to just be one device, and then I dock it on my desk and it turns into a desktop. I took a second risk because I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead because I don't love this computer. I'm going to try this new Apple Silicon thing. I'm going to see if it's going to solve my issues with like Mac for production. And it solved all of them. Like what Jonah's saying like is just so on the nose. Like Silicon's just changed the way that I use computers. Everything else feels like it's just garbage next to it right now. And it sucks because macOS is not my favorite operating system. And I wish that I could have that access to power on the Linux machines. And it's why I'm so excited for Fedora being on macOS with their new spin, which is really cool. But it's still really preliminary. For context, if you're a Linux lover, you've never used Apple devices, Linus himself uses a MacBook now to literally develop Linux. And he runs Fedora on his MacBook Air. So just something to leave you all with. It's a nice device. You asked about the Apple Watch thing. So this is when I was playing around with the Punkt workflow and I was doing the Punkt review because I was trying to see like, can I daily drive a Punkt phone? If I can't, which I could not, can I have it as like a ready to go backup phone? So when I leave the house and I don't want to bring my smartphone with me for whatever reason, I just bring the Punkt phone and it's just kind of an emergency phone as a backup. And Jonah suggested the Apple Watch. I actually bought your old Apple Watch from you to test this out. And it still works, and it works well. I'd say my biggest issue is Signal not having an Apple Watch client. If
Yeah.
Signal had an Apple Watch client, I think that this workflow that you're proposing of like going phoneless and just bringing a watch with you when you leave the house is amazing. Because I tried this whole workflow where I set up like my card numbers on the Apple Watch, I set up a cell plan, I set up Signal, and I just left the house. And I was like, okay, what can this thing do? And it actually does a lot. And I will say the one best thing about the Apple Watch, and it's something that I actually use for navigation now, the Apple Watch is the best way to navigate when you're driving on like road trips and stuff, and like nothing will convince me otherwise. I hate navigation voices because they interrupt me when I'm talking to people or when someone's talking to me. They interrupt my music, and also I like knowing what's happening, not at like the predetermined voice alerts, if you know what I mean. And it just buzzes when you make a left or right turn, or you just like quickly look at your wrist. But looking at your wrist, your hands can still stay on the wheel. You don't have to check your phone or take your eyes away from important stuff. So it just feels a lot safer, and it's just really solid. So yeah, I actually really much agree with the two you picked, because I'm generally not a huge fan of most Apple products, but they really,
Yeah.
I think they really kill both of those. So yeah.
All right, we'll move on to, looks like the next question here is from Izzy. This is a good one for you, I think. Since we can agree that advocacy is an important element of privacy, and historically music and other art forms have been used in that sort of process, should the creatives who are passionate about this topic cover it in their work as a form of activism? And if so, what aspects should be highlighted without it coming off too strongly or corny? And I think this is a good time for you to get into privacy music videos, Henry. How about it?
I hate your selective memory. Why do you have such a selective memory? You forget everything that's important. I was like, you forgot you were NDA'd. The whole thing you signed, but you remember the privacy music video idea that was vetoed by the team.
Bring it back.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really hard to. I think the hardest part of creating more like art than information is doing more like art forms in a non-cringe way, and I think that just comes with practice and experience, and is why we should have done the music video idea, because then we would have learned how to do it again without it being corny. And then now maybe we'd have a viral YouTube channel where we just make music videos, and we just throw in little privacy lines here and there, and everyone in the world would be using a private browser and Signal and really good stuff. You ever thought about that, Jonah? The whole reason privacy is just not valued by the world is because of you?
Not because of me. Surely I didn't veto this idea. That I don't remember.
Yeah, but no, I think like school for me has been digital media, and so I'm around artists, and artists are my favorite people. And it's just something that you have to learn and practice. And I have like my own little relationship with art that I don't really share too much publicly with. But it's something you just have to keep practicing on. And I think the more you do it, the less cringe it'll be and the less corny it'll be. But there's a way to do it. You just have to be able to do it. And I don't know how to tell you how to do it, but you can do it. And I like your profile icon. It's cute.
If anyone makes a privacy music video or some other form of privacy-related artwork, please share it on the forum.
They made a whole music video on how to pronounce OpenSUSE. So like it's not like super never seen before for the community, you know? I think it's a good idea. I think if you want to see this idea, you should let me know in the live chat. Just imagine fast cars, yachts, just talking about, man, I love my fast car, but I hate the data it collects. And
That's such a good idea, actually.
You hook them in with a flashy car and you tell them the problems with the car. Anyway, I think it's genius. Yeah, I think this, here, I'll ask you this one. I see in resources you recommend Fedora, CubesOS, Arch, and Debian. Is there a reason Linux Mint or Zorin OS don't make the list? And wouldn't it be better to recommend a service that's also good for beginners like Mint and Zorin for people who are moving away from Windows?
I truly have never used Zorin OS, not gonna lie. So I can't speak too much to it, unfortunately. it's when it comes to Linux, I think it is really good to stick with like the for new people especially the biggest. It really depends on who you're recommending this to. I think that a lot of our recommendations for better or for worse tend to be towards people who are technical or at least interested in like learning about technology in the first place. If it was somebody like who has no interest in using Linux and you're kind of like forcing it on them, maybe something like Linux Mint or something more Windows like would make more sense. But I think that a lot of people are really like passionate about privacy in this space and learning new things. And so the kind of like the barrier to entry of something like Fedora is like slightly higher maybe from a user interface perspective, but it's still pretty simple to learn. And also because it's so much of a bigger community, you could find so many more resources about Fedora yourself. I think that's the main thing. Um, Whereas like these smaller operating systems, there isn't a huge community. You can't easily search up a problem that you're having and solve it yourself. You probably have to find another expert who can help solve it for you. It's just kind of annoying. And the other reason is that like these distros are like tried and tested, and they have been around for basically forever, and they solve their respective problems really well. So like we know that Fedora, for example, is on the cutting edge of like new security technologies in the Linux space, and that it's going to be a good all-around solution for people who want like modern hardware and modern security and privacy features and just a modern OS in general that's also like really stable and well supported and run by a huge community with like uh, Red Hat behind a lot of the development as well. So you have like people who are literally paid full time to work on this as opposed to like hobbyist projects. Um, so I think those are like the main reasons I think that sticking with those distros is usually a better like general recommendation. At least when I'm talking about Linux to a lot of people. Uh, I I'm not gonna like I generally don't recommend against many distros. Like if you find one that works for you, I think that switching to it is going to improve your privacy and security. If you're switching from like something like Windows, for example, you even if it's not like my top recommendation, it's leagues apart from Windows 10 or especially Windows 11 right now. Just switching to any Linux distro at all. So you definitely should figure out like what works for you more than um, like going with a specific distro. But that's why those are my top recommendations anyways. I don't know if you have anything to add about that, Henry.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly like just I don't really have a huge bias in general towards like any against I'd say any particular. I have distros I definitely prefer and think do certain things
Yeah.
better, like Jonas said, but I don't really have anything against any other distro. So just because I don't mention or we don't list Linux Mint or Zorin, doesn't mean it's not good and can't do a use case. They're all fairly similar in what they do. I think maybe a better solution to this is to find a nice resource that consolidates like all the Linux distros, and I think that would be a good idea to add to the resources. And I'm sure there is a resource for that. So if anyone can let me know, feel free to email me. Use the contact at techlore.tech. Let me know if there's like a central resource where like people can put in like information about them, or they can filter by different things to find a good Linux distro for them. I think that would be actually really solid. Yeah, someone said the new surveillance pod has no audio, so I will ping. Do you mind pinging Jordan for that? Who then can ping Nate, or you can just ping Nate. I can't
Oh
change
boy.
signal on my end
I
right now.
will. I'll message Jordan.
Yeah.
Something I was going to say while I'm texting. Um, I, I, I do have a personal bias against Manjaro and other distros, and I think that
That's
if
fair.
you're just taking my advice and you're using Manjaro, you should switch. I just wanted to throw that out
Okay.
there.
That's fair. I know there's a lot of drama with that one, and I understand why you say that. And actually, someone sent us a tip here, a Monero tip, while we were talking. So thanks, Kevin, for letting us know about the surveillance pod video and about the tip. But on this note, they asked, what are our favorite choices for a Linux distro? Would you ever switch to a Linux desktop as a full-time daily driver? So yeah, I've already used a lot of Linux full-time daily drivers, including Debian and Fedora were probably the ones I was on the longest, though I did start with Ubuntu. I feel like that's just a very common starting point for a lot of people, and it's not the worst distro, I don't think. It gets a lot of hate, though, but it's not my least favorite distro out there. And Fedora would definitely still be my top choice. I'm actually just really waiting for Fedora to be available on MacBooks. And I'm following that project super closely because I think that's actually the best of all worlds, running Fedora on Apple Silicon. But right now there's still a lot of important things that don't really work on the MacBook Pro. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think my starting was also Ubuntu. I wonder what version you started with. Because I think in my case it was like 11.04 or something.
I installed it when 2014, I think. So
yeah.
whatever was the newest in 2014 is what I was using.
14.04. It's easy to remember because it's the year.
Okay. Yeah.
14.04 or 14.10.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, now that you said it, I'm like, yeah, no, that was totally it. And I remember updating to 14.10 for the first time, and that was like a whole thing, so.
I remember that being a big change. For some reason, like 14.04 or sticks out in my mind. Because I think I probably upgraded from like 12 or something, so
Yeah.
2 years worth of updates.
Well, that was
development
the LTS.
moved faster back then too.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. Like 14.04 was the big LTS update. And then
Mm-hmm.
I used 14.10, and I don't think I ever moved beyond 14.10. And then I think I tried Debian, and then from Debian I did Fedora. And to this day I would use Fedora, and I still use Fedora for some things. I really like Fedora. It's just, I really like GNOME. It's really nice. It's very clean, and it really agrees with my keyboard-based navigation that I use as someone who loves keyboard-based nav. So, yeah.
Wait, my tab crashed.
Oh, no.
I'm using a weird computer to open the form. I have to reload everything. 1 sec. Maybe you should just get the next one.
Mohammed, we're running a little bit low on time, so I'll pick this one because I think it's a good one here. The third question. Mohammed asked, how's your reaction when MKBHD announced his panels app and why he's breaking his own rules regarding user privacy and fairness, not to mention AI, arts, ads, and especially that yearly subscription. I'm gonna condense that to what are our thoughts on the panels app. We talked about it quite a bit actually in the Signal group. Because it's the new thing and everybody's talking about it. But also because we're creators too, and so we want to see when other creators release things, what was obviously wrong with that, what was good with that. And this one, there's not a lot of good, and I don't think we would have had to analyze the situation to not make similar mistakes. My thoughts are, it's not great. I mean, it's got ads in it, and so that's why you see those privacy labels, and it's really a bummer because that's not even data collection. That's inherent to MKBHD and whoever's working on the app, but that's because of the ads that are built into it. So there's that. And then there's the annual subscription, which seems really high for end users and people like ourselves. But yeah, I think it's my take, and Jonah actually has a really good take. So you should really stick around for Jonah's take because he brought up a really good point that I hadn't considered here. I think that if any other YouTuber released this app, no one would have cared. Honestly, I think MKBHD has such a spotless reputation that he does the smallest thing wrong, and everyone's like, oh my god, he did something wrong. This is a big, noteworthy event. And I feel the same way about politicians. Some politicians can straight up say crazy things on explicit forums. I don't know if anyone's keeping up with that. And I feel like they're still relevant because their history is just so insane and people don't have any higher expectations for them. But people who have a spotless history have higher expectations of them. And then when they make even a small mistake, it's almost seen as more newsworthy. So I think that kind of happened to MKBHD here. Honestly, no one forced, he's still putting out the content. He's still doing what he was known for. No one has to download the app. And I think that it doesn't deserve the amount of hate it's getting, even though it's a kind of a garbage product in my opinion. But Jonah has a really interesting take actually that I hadn't thought about.
What? Well, I kind of have two thoughts about this. You might have to remind me of what my interesting take is now that you hyped it up. No, but I'll share what I think. First of all, I think that MKBHD, r- he I think he's in a weird position as like a content creator, where like I think he overestimated like the amount of people who want an app like this in the first place. There's like it 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 makes a lot of sense from like his perspective, I think, to like he's advertising these wallpapers on his channel, for example, if he can somehow monetize that and also like give a cut to the artist who made it as well. That's kind of like a win-win situation for his channel, for the artists who make these wallpapers, that kind of thing. And I think that like I think it's just not the reality of what most people do with like the wallpapers on their phone. It's a very like content creator brained way of thinking about wallpapers, for example. And I think that like well he might be concerned about like which wallpapers are on his device and changing them constantly and having them good in videos and having people like download them. I think that the reality is most people just search Google for like HD wallpapers and download like whatever they find for free, and they don't really care about the artists or who made it or that kind of thing. So like the demand just isn't really there from a lot of people. So I think that the way that he launched it was weird for sure. But the other thing I think about like this whole it's kind of more to do with like tech YouTubers in general. It's really a case of these, especially like consumer electronics reviewers like MKBHD, for example, they are almost more like fashion reviewers than they are like tech reviewers. They're not diving deep into a lot of the technology that they cover on their channel all the time. They are um, like mainly thinking about like how tech looks, how they can like benefit from it in their day-to-day lives. They're not really thinking about like the long-term consequences of all the things that they're using. Like they're using um, AI assistants and AI pins or whatever, for example, and trying to like evaluate all of this from a usability perspective, which is one thing, but these channels don't dive into like
The critical
how all that
aspects.
works, the critical aspects of it,
Yeah.
right? And it's really just like it's really just focused on the experience and the here and now, and not how technology works and not how it's changing our society in any way. They're not focused on that, and I think it's why these channels are so much bigger than like a channel like Techlore, for example, because there's a lot more mass appeal in just like reviewing it. But it's they're just using these electronics and getting the latest devices and showing off flashy new features as like basically a fashion statement more than like from a technologist point of view. And I think that MKBHD has been like doing this for so long and has been like really well supported by his audience for creating these videos, that I think that that is just his main focus now, and he really never got to go on this like path of diving deeper into the technology that he uses, or like learning how computer science works, or learning how all of this thing works, like the nitty gritty. So he might not have like the right perspective when it comes to more in-depth things like this, and like developing your own app, for example. That takes a lot of work, and I think that he just wasn't very well prepared for the whole thing. Is
Yeah. I mean, we've
kind of
talked
what I think.
a lot about this in the past of like the concept of what reviews are. And I think one of the most common criticisms that we get on our reviews on Techlore is that they were too critical. But I feel like they reflect my experience, and I tend to be more critical in the reviews because I'm not just evaluating the experience. If it was just about experience, you know, and there are many VPNs out there, for example, that have fantastic experiences. But what's critical is talking about, hey, here's actually the behind the scenes difference between this VPN and this VPN if you're somebody who cares more about where your data is going. Or here's where this one is better than this one, and having a little bit of nuance. I do think, I actually really, for the record, I like MKBHD's content. And he's one of the few YouTube channels on my RSS feed alongside Judge Judy, just so you know how quality my RSS feed is. Um, but um, I really like his reviews. As somebody who doesn't care much about technology, for me, they're like a quick summary of like what's new for things I just don't really care much about. Like, I don't really care about the new Pixel Fold. I think folding phones are stupid in general, and they don't make any sense, and you get a little bit of sand in the middle, and it's done. And that's just crazy to me. And they're so expensive, and they're just not even geared towards the regular person. And I agree that, like, a lot of these devices are just kind of fashion statements almost in a way. But I learned from them, and I think they're valuable. I just don't think they're critical enough about the technologies. But that's also not what the channel is. I think that MKBHD, or Marquez himself, has a lot more thoughts on the tech that he just isn't able to share with the channel that he's built and developed. And the reason I say that is because in the Pixel review, he kept going back to this sentence, which was along the lines of, what even is a photo anymore? Because of all the new AI features that Google announced that allow you to literally take a subject out of a picture and put it into a totally different background and swap people's faces so that everybody's smiling in the photo. It's kind of creepy stuff. And he really just covered the tech, but then he ends it by saying, what is a photo anymore? And I feel like that's one of the few moments where like he's trying to be critical, but he knows he can't be too critical because that's not what his channel's about. So I think if you were to ask him his same thing with Cybertruck, I feel like he's also super critical of the Cybertruck, but he just can't really say it because he's there to cover the experience. But he has a lot of like small sentences he says. So yeah, for the record, the enlightening thing that you said, I feel, which kind of went to your first point, was he kind of, as a content creator, this makes sense because you have to use like licensed things for your content. And so that's something that he could have geared this more towards other content creators, because like a $60 a year subscription for cool wallpapers to use in all your videos as a content creator isn't as bad of a selling point as what he used as a selling point. So,
Right.
but that was what you said to me that I didn't consider.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. I think that he didn't consider it. I think that he just assumed that there was a market that wasn't there, because I think that he has probably been doing that kind of thing for so long, thinking about like the content creation side of things, that like he does, like maybe he overlooked that most people really do not care about copyright and that sort of thing, and they're just going to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Go on to the next question here from at Amy is Cools. Kind of basically they're just wondering if this setup is overkill or too little or just the right balance for their threat model, and they kind of go over what their setup is exactly. It's a bit of a long post. I would just answer that really quickly by saying that like a big part of threat modeling in particular is like putting in the amount of effort that feels right to you. So it's really hard to say like whether this is too overkill or just the right balance, because like if you have this setup which has a lot of like self-hosted services and stuff like that and custom ROMs, and if that all works for you and if you're happy with it, then it would be a good balance. But if you're frustrated with this setup, there are probably things that you could cut back on or find alternatives to that might work easier. But that's, when it comes to threat modeling, a lot of it is personal subjective experience. There isn't a right answer for what somebody should be doing in your situation, because it's really what you are comfortable with doing. So, I mean, if you want like a lot of specific advice, it'd probably be better for you to like repost this maybe on the forum to get community feedback of things other people do to see what you could improve. There's also coaching sessions on Techlore.tech that you can apply for if you want to like discuss this more in depth for your specific situation. But like that's kind of what I would say generally overall. I feel like it's people think that there is a correct answer to threat modeling and there's a correct answer to privacy, and I just want to really reiterate that a lot of it is more subjective and more down to your personal what you're comfortable with doing and what you can do. So
Yeah, no, I really agree. I think it's really hard. Even though you were really dense with what you provided, there's still a lot of missing context here in regards to like you, the people you know, how it's like to communicate with them, what your day-to-day life looks like, what your time requirements are, what issues you currently have with your workflow, what your goals even are. So I I would encourage you, first off, nothing you're doing seems wrong. So I just want to reassure that like everything here looks pretty good. There's nothing obviously wrong with what you're doing. And I think that, again, if you want more specific advice, I think asking the forum, or this is why there's like one-on-one coaching, because this kind of stuff can be like a long time to kind of talk through people with. It's just really personalized. So yeah, sorry, there's no perfect answer, but I feel like trying to get at this, like the only way to answer it in a live stream is if we had you on the live stream and we could ask you questions to kind of figure out like what exactly you're having issues with and what works and what doesn't work for your workflow. This is a quick question for you. Is there a hosting service that can be hosted in Russia that's cheap and accepts crypto?
That has servers in Russia. I don't think any of the usual hosting providers I would recommend operate in Russia, and I don't know whether they're logged in Russia. So unfortunately, I don't have good advice on this. But if you ask on the forum, I can try and get back to you, or see if somebody else in the community knows. But I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, sorry, it's not something I have much insight on either. So, yeah, here I'll.
All right. Next question from anonymous one on the forum. I regularly donate to a few open source projects I rely on every 6 months, including KDE, Signal, NewPipe, Mozilla Firefox, mostly via PayPal, it looks like. I want to support these projects in a more privacy conscious way. What would you recommend for donating while maintaining privacy, especially when they use non-private payment platforms like PayPal? So they have other questions too, but we can break them up. So do you have any thoughts about those platforms in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would ask, would you still have PayPal and still use PayPal if you weren't contributing to these projects? Because if the answer is yes, then I don't think there's that much of an additional like privacy risk. And if you already have the account, it already has your bank information, and there's nothing inherently sensitive about you contributing to a few open source projects, at least for most people. That's probably not a big concern for them. I would just say it's not the worst place to be, and actually using PayPal means that like you don't have to share your card directly with all four of these platforms, all four of these services, which is really nice. So I don't have an inherent issue with it. I will say if you use something like Signal, I don't know what phone you use. If you're using KDE or something like Linux on your computer, I have to guess, and you use NewPipe, you probably don't have things like Google Play services on your phone is my guess, because otherwise I would probably recommend something like Google Play to like mask your card number or something like that. And you can go through directly, like Signal, for example, you can go directly through the app and donate through Signal in the app. But yeah, I just really would ask, like, what do you feel is the privacy risk? And if you feel like it's too much, then if you're in the US, you have options like privacy.com, and you can contribute directly. And if you don't, or you can't use privacy.com for whatever reason, see if any of them support cryptocurrency. If they don't, reach out and see if there's another option that they can give you. Just explain your situation. And then in terms of my take on contributing through code, I think it's great, especially if you have the resources for it and you have the knowledge for it. That's typically almost more useful than just money, because that's just a very rare asset that not everyone can do. And so you getting involved is just really important. And community involvement's huge, I think. I mean, like the whole reason we can even host this Q&A is because of community involvement. And now we get to like answer questions for hundreds, if not thousands of other people that have them. Because a lot of these questions we make into clips, and like I don't know if people have been keeping up with the clips channel, but it's getting like a lot of traction the last couple months. And it's because of like all of you getting involved with what we're doing. So like literally what you all do does directly help, not just us, but the rest of the community. So it can really make a big difference. Those are my thoughts. But
yeah, pretty much what I was gonna say. Like you also have to reach out to these platforms, like you said, and see if they accept cryptocurrency or something else. The reality is, I personally think that like the modern financial transactional system, and it's all kind of pretty much the same, regardless of like payment processor like PayPal or Stripe or whatever. If you're paying with a credit card, you're kind of going through the same networks at the end of the day, and it's not going to make a substantial impact to most people's lives. So like PayPal versus LibrePay, I think there might be some difference, but I think it's pretty minimal compared to like switching to something like Monero, for example. That's like a different league when it comes to privacy, but it really depends on what these services accept more than anything. And in some cases, that's not possible. And I think that like if they only accept PayPal and you're fine with using PayPal, that is a really good way to support projects, because at the end of the day, these projects do need donations to keep running. And like the privacy benefits overall of having Signal and Firefox and KDE existing in the first place is huge, not just for you, but for so many people. So supporting that any way you can is so much better than like trying to ensure you have perfect financial privacy, or especially if that means like otherwise not supporting a project. Not saying that you wouldn't support it if you couldn't use PayPal, but like if it comes down to it, it's really good to have most people donating whenever possible to these projects. I guess that kind of touches on your last question too, how you personally decide when and how to contribute to a project. I try and contribute to pretty much any projects that I use, especially on a daily basis. And I think that it's really important to support these projects and keep them running if you get value out of it, because pretty much all of these projects require a lot of effort and time and money, and they're really important to support. So
yeah, totally agreed. And just a quick update to the last question. Someone asked about Signal in Russia and like hosting their own servers. Someone already left a response to you, I believe, in the Q&A chat on the bottom, and they recommend something called aeza.net, and they say that there's Russian servers and that they accept Monero. So, just what a community member said, so I can't really vouch for it, but like I said, community involvement is really important, because now you all can help each other out when we don't know something.
Yeah. I've never heard of that platform personally, but check it out, see if it works for you.
Yeah, and then just a finishing touch on the anonymous one question. I in my personal life, I normally contribute to one project at a time. Just whatever, like I feel like I'm using the most and I want to support the most, just because I really don't like subscriptions. So I normally do one at a time for my personal life. And it was Signal. I paused the Signal one just because I feel like Signal's been a little like weird with the community lately, and like not really addressing some of the concerns that the community's been having. And I haven't really restarted one since. So I do need to get back on that. But with Techlore, we're consistently supporting monthly the EFF, Calyx Institute, Privacy Guides, which Jonah works on, F-Droid, Tor browser, and WireGuard. So if you use any of those, it's not a huge amount, but like we are contributing monthly to them. And if everyone did that, if they just contributed to one service, I think the privacy space would look very different. I think people really undervalue the impact that contributing to just one project has. Because when it's blown up to the scale of the whole privacy community, it'll really be good.
Yeah. And to add on to that, I also don't have a lot of like subscriptions. I don't support a lot of things on a monthly basis, but I mean, if you really think about it, like if you wanted to support something for $5 a month, it's just $60 a year. If you contributed like $60 or $100 on a one-time basis, for example, that's going to be just as good, and you don't have to worry about like forgetting about a subscription or anything like that, or being overcharged. If you want to make like one-time donations to all these platforms, that is perfectly acceptable and just as good in a lot of cases, and lets you maybe manage your money better. So I would recommend doing that before like supporting a ton of services on a monthly basis, unless you get like monthly benefits out of it like you do on Patreon, for example.
Yeah, but agreed. Yeah, and for Techlorians too, on our forum, there is a one-time option there too. So I'm glad you brought that up, because you don't have to be a monthly person. You don't get the benefits, but if you do want to like contribute to Techlore, now you can do it just with a one-off payment, and it's directly through us, no middle parties. So that's something I'm really happy you set that up. I'm really excited about it, actually. As someone
I think there's yearly payment options too as well.
Okay. Cool.
If I remember, unless I'm making that up.
Yeah, I didn't double check that, so we'll double check that.
I'm logged out now, so I can't look, but I'm pretty sure there's like a yearly, like if if that's easier for you to
Yeah.
make like a larger payment one time instead of trying to keep up with a bunch of monthly stuff.
Yeah,
And you want the benefits on the form.
we have I'm not seeing actually the bar in my new browser window, but there's a little like status goal bar on the top. Um, and we're trying to pretty much hit our first goal there. So if you're somebody who likes what we're doing and you get value from this, that's kind of what we're trying out right now. And it's most certainly, I think, going to stick because we already have some new Techlorians who are kind of like starting it out, and I'm really happy about it. And it's a good alternative to Patreon because we still want to stay on Patreon right now, but a lot of people have voiced that like either their privacy.com cards get rejected by Patreon or they just don't like using Patreon for one reason or another. So now you don't have to use Patreon and still get the core benefits of it. So since we are already an hour and 50 minutes in, we're going to do like a little rapid fire. We're going to try to answer like the last remaining questions on the forum as quick as possible, and then just go through the live stream questions as quick as we can as well. And then we'll finish it out. So someone asked about the Nextcloud series. It has not been formally forgotten. It's just a project that I started and I should have waited to start, and other things are taking priority over it. So Go Incognito is a big one, and a lot of other projects that we work on back here, like the individual videos that we do. So it's just consistently deprioritized, but I still want to do it. I'm wearing a Nextcloud shirt right now, actually. So I know it's a bit ironic, but it's not something I don't want to do in the future. But yeah, I do hope to do it at some point. Just time is always limited.
Do you guys know of any privacy-focused health apps at Windmill S on the forum, like counting steps, counting heartbeats and calories, workout tracking? If you're in the Apple ecosystem, Apple Health is entirely local. I don't know if you know of any on Android. I've been meaning to look into this again because I know that it's changed a lot since the last time I looked for these apps. There weren't a lot of options, and I think there are now, but I don't know specifically what to recommend at the moment.
Not for Android. But yeah, we're kind of due for, we did a video on this. If you want to see me running and being outdoors for once, we have like kind of a fitness tracking video that we put out a few years ago. But while none of the advice in it is wrong, I just think there's now more options since that happened, which is good. So I think we're kind of due for an update on that. I will say if you are in the Apple ecosystem, HealthFit is super solid. It gives you like much better stats. Apple Health, awful stats. Just the way it breaks down workouts and stuff just doesn't make sense. If you come from like Garmin and you're more used to how the way Garmin does things, HealthFit is local. And it even has sharing built in. So you can share your workouts with people, but it does it via iCloud. So like you add someone's iCloud email and you host your own data and your own files in your own iCloud account. So that's a really cool little workflow for people who want to like host their own workouts and be able to move their workouts freely between different areas. But with cloud support on your own cloud provider. It's a really interesting little workflow. So HealthFit, if you want to check that out, that's something that I've been trying to like tinker with and figure out the ins and outs of. Someone asked, Internet Ghost, who's a trailblazer, how does Vivaldi factor into your recommendations for browsers? If you have to place it on a spectrum of Tor browser on one end and Chrome on the other, where would it fall? That's a good question. I'll start and just say I think it's definitely a lot closer to Chrome. The way I see Vivaldi myself is it doesn't have the kind of like privacy concerns of being from Google, of being a big tech company, of like collecting more data than it needs to collect. I actually interviewed the Vivaldi CEO on the channel if you want to like look into what the kind of data Vivaldi collects. And they're a super great team. Love the team, love the mission, love what they do. I think that just what Vivaldi does is they don't have the kind of privacy techniques and tools that are utilized by like more strictly privacy focused browsers like Brave or Bolvad browser. So I think that's what you're missing with Vivaldi browser. So I say Vivaldi collects less data than Google Chrome would, but you're missing out on some of those more sophisticated privacy tools that you're going to get on those more advanced browsers, is my take on Vivaldi. But it's a good browser. If you like it, then feel free to use it. I don't know if Jonah has a different take there.
No, pretty much I would say the same thing. It this is why I don't really like these like one-dimensional spectrums of like Chrome to Tor browser or like threat modeling from high to low, which is that the reality is these things don't exist on the same spectrum. And like especially Tor browser really solves a completely different problem than like something like Brave or Molvad browser, which I think might be more appropriate to have on the other end of a spectrum with Chrome. Um, uh, but I mean, as far as Vivaldi specifically, I don't really have anything to add. I think I I don't use it, so I can't really add more than that.
Yeah, I tried downloading it and I want to give it a shot again, but if I don't know, if you listen to what we do enough, you'll know that I'm a very like simple kind of guy in terms of the software I like. So if it's too much for me, I kind of just mentally check out very quickly, and Vivaldi for me did land in that bucket, which is also why people love Vivaldi. Like the Vivaldi community is like diehard for Vivaldi. And I think it's really cool. So if you like Vivaldi, I know why you like it, and it's because it's just so customizable. You can make Vivaldi look like anything and pretty much do anything, and it's a super powerful browser. And it seems like it has really cool features too. Like it has its own email client built in. It has its own, I think it has its own RSS thing built in. Like you can pretty much do a lot of things in Vivaldi, but it was just too much for my brain. Same reason I don't like Obsidian. Same reason I didn't like what's that productivity tool? Notion. Oh my gosh. Every person talks about how Notion solves their life's problems. Oh my gosh, my life was such a mess, and I got Notion, and then I'm like, I tried it out, and I go, dude, it's a part-time job to just maintain this so it's usable. And that's not even talking about the privacy concerns with Notion, which I very much don't enjoy either. But I was just gonna see it like maybe for like business Techlore stuff. Does this make sense? And man, it was a nightmare. So yeah, sorry, I said to keep them short, but I had rants. This is a good question for you. What's stopping an agency from just flooding the Tor network with tons of nodes?
Yeah, good question. The answer is the Tor's like relays is kind of a centralized directory, and they kick people out regularly who are suspicious. There is some like level of standard that you have to be to maintain Tor relays, and they really like they don't proactively moderate relays. It's not like a whitelist system. You can spin up a relay at any time, which is really great for end users. But they monitor it for suspicious activity, and they like hold, especially like larger relay operators. If you're operating more than one, they hold you to like much higher transparency standards as far as like your contact information being available, etc. Because it really is like you're contributing to a network, and you're not really supposed to be doing that part of the Tor network anonymously. So that's something that they keep an eye on and regularly look at. And they have found suspicious networks on there before. They've removed hundreds of nodes at some point. Famously, like I think it was a few years ago that there was like a threat actor that was operating hundreds of nodes secretively, and they had to deal with that. And it's just something that they keep in mind. But it really is kind of like a centralized system where they can decide which relays are on the network, which is either good or bad depending on how you think about it. But that's kind of the main defense right now on their end.
Nice. Yeah, next question is about ISPs and thoughts on ISPs and what we look for, purchasing or renting network equipment, and of course comparing that to using a VPN. I think that what I look for, the question is, what do I look for in an ISP? Do they support fiber? And that kind of isolates my options to one in any given location. And the reason why is because from what I've seen in almost all areas, there really isn't a huge difference between most ISP providers, at least in the US. I think that there's one or two in certain locations that actually have a little bit more of a commitment towards user privacy, but that's not one that most people have access to. I don't know what it looks like in other countries, but I'd say everyone has to look at them individually for their own kind of use cases. Personally, I think the comparison to a shady VPN versus a trustworthy ISP is kind of like a fake comparison, because I like, how many trustworthy ISPs are there? so that it's already just kind of a fake comparison, I think. And also, why not just use a non-shady VPN? So if you are concerned about your ISP knowing about what you're looking up online and them collecting that data, just get a trustworthy VPN. Techlore.tech/VPN. We have a nice chart there. You can pick the one that works for you. And yeah, I don't, maybe Jonah can speak more to the network equipment. I don't know if they're able to collect any more or less data if you have your own equipment. What I do know is that you owning your own equipment just enables a lot more control of your network and allows you to do a lot more things than native equipment will let you do, which will indirectly improve your privacy and security in a lot of cases. So I don't know if Jonah has other thoughts here.
Absolutely. I mean, you should always try and own your equipment, or if you have to like use their equipment, you should put your own router behind it, so you kind of have that separation between your network and theirs. If you're using their equipment, they have pretty much full access to anything your router can see, which is a lot of information, and it's actually more information than what they would otherwise have if it's your equipment, because they can see like traffic that is just internal within your network, for example, and they can see like exactly what devices you have connected. Whereas if you use your own router and kind of firewall that off, they can see the traffic that's coming out of the router, and they might be able to infer what kind of devices that you have. Like if they see a lot of connections to iCloud, they could probably assume you have some Apple devices, but they don't know the exact details of the devices you have connected to your network if that is on a separated piece of equipment that they don't have control over. So you definitely do want to have your network something that only you have administrative access over, and have that kind of firewall off so you can control exactly what goes in and out. Exactly like what you were saying. It's just a matter of being able to control that more effectively, which you should aim to do.
Yeah, I actually didn't think about that or know that. So I think that actually makes it even more direct than what I was implying. So that's really cool. We kind of already touched on like whether or not we think other social media alternatives can take over. So I'd go back to see that. And I think here's the last question. So,
all right, at JC Techlore, I downloaded ProtonVPN a few months ago via the Play Store and have been using it anonymously as a guest with no problem. I recently purchased a new Android device, and this time I downloaded the same VPN, but there seems to be no option to use the VPN as a guest, so I'm given no option but to sign in with an actual email address. I did not know you could use ProtonVPN anonymously.
That's a new thing.
Honest.
That came out recently, and it was like a big announcement that ProtonVPN free is now just, it's kind of like how if you ever used RiseUp or Calyx VPN, you just download it and just connect.
Interesting. I must have missed that.
I'm guessing this is to prevent abuse, is my guess.
I'm not sure why it would be different from on the F-Droid version, but I know that Proton has not exactly had the best track record of keeping their open source repositories and apps up to date. So
well, that's why they included the version.
I would imagine it's that is strange, but I don't know exactly what they are doing to support that. I would probably ask Proton support. It seems like probably more of an oversight on their end, but I have not heard of that issue.
Yeah, I wish we had more insight. No more XMR chat things. Thank you, everybody who asked questions. We'll go to the live chat in a sec, but I just wanted to thank everybody who asked questions in advance on our forum, especially our Techlorians. You're all like kind of the people who support all that we're doing, and we couldn't do it without you. Thank you to everyone sending us Monero. And yeah, I hope that we were able to adequately address all your questions. And now, live stream. I actually didn't see a huge amount of questions along the way, so we might be able to knock these out pretty quick. Do you use PineTime or any other privacy-respecting smart device other than a smartphone? No, I've never tried a PineTime. I generally avoid most IoT devices. I think the closest thing I have to an IoT device is, like I said earlier, there's that Apple Watch that I've been kind of trying to use for testing and seeing like a phone-free workflow, and it's nice for certain things. But the PineTime just seems very limited for what it is. But it seems like a great product. And I know Nate uses one. And if you watch Surveillance Report, you might see that Nate wears it sometimes. And he seems to really like it. So it seems like one of the more usable, like user-friendly Pine 64 devices that they have. But do you use anything?
Cool. Not really.
I realized I missed the question. Let me move the chat down. There you go. Now people can see it. Study of the Wiki. Yeah, Walter, like every new video we've been uploading the last few weeks, they're one of the first commenters, and they say Techlore, and now I'm just saying Waltier. Oh, someone said they saw a cups update on their Mint machine, so I wonder if they patched that issue.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that after this stream because I wonder if it's fixed. But I really, again, don't think a lot of people are going to be impacted.
Yeah. Someone asked, is it bad for privacy to register to vote? If so, are there reasonable ways to avoid that issue? Man, that's a hard one. It's a really hard one. Legally speaking, you do have to give a residential address. And in most areas, that is public info when you vote. So yeah, in a lot of ways, voting is bad for privacy. And it does expose really sensitive information about individuals. Are there reasonable ways to avoid that issue? Not ones that are probably legal. So yeah, it's a really tough one. I don't know, Jonah, if you have anything that you know of, but it's a really hard issue to deal with. Transparency and privacy are a very clashing concept in a lot of situations. So
yeah, well, this is I feel like this is something that's going to come down to a state-by-state basis too. So it's really hard to generally say, even just within the United States, not to mention all the other places where there's voter registration. But yeah, it's always going to be problematic when you're giving out that information to any entity, and even regardless of whether it's public or private, because it's not like the government has an amazing track record of keeping their systems free of data breaches, especially smaller governments. Like when you get into local governments, it's pretty common to have even more security issues. So it's just something to be concerned about, but it is what it is. I don't really have suggestions on how to avoid that.
yeah,
Because sometimes it's just how things work. And the reality is, a lot of that information is going to be available to governments, various government entities in most cases anyways.
Yeah, I do think the issue I have with it is the fact that it's public. Like most voter records in most areas are public, so anyone can just kind of see the local voter records and just check the address that's registered.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big bummer. So let's see. Yeah, I appreciate people letting me know about the other video on surveillance report having no audio. I'll be sure to yell at Nate for that one very aggressively.
A privacy song would go viral.
See?
I agree.
At least one person agrees.
I think you should work on it.
Jordan's next project. We're going to do a music video. And here's what it's going to look like.
RBQ426, what are your thoughts on Pixel products? I feel like we cover Pixel products quite a bit. If you want to use a custom ROM, they're pretty much the only solid option in the Android space. Most phones don't support that functionality at all, so
yeah,
kind of is what it is. But I haven't seen any reason to not use them for that use case. I wouldn't use Pixel products as is and trust my whole life to the Google ecosystem, if that's what you're asking. I wouldn't personally start using all the new Pixel AI features and Gemini and whatever AI you're either adding to their camera app.
Yeah, I gotta say, I do love the usability of just regular stock Pixels. It's a nice OS to be on, but I think overall I was happier on the custom ROM side of things in terms of just how much cleaner it is, and I still have the same flexibility, but with a lot less of the nuisance. But yeah, I generally am mixed on Android in general, as well as all
Yeah.
mobile operating systems, to be honest. I have issues with iOS too. Um, but if I'm going to pick an Android device, it's always going to be a Pixel.
Zero X asks, do you think Apple TV is relatively privacy-friendly streaming device compared to other options? That's kind of it's a thing with all Apple products, which is that, are they the most private products? No, but do you generally know what data you're giving up, what privacy you're giving up. There's no hidden stuff with it, and you can usually like use these products and make an educated decision on your own end of whether, it's worth it to use these products over something else. And I think that the Apple TV is going to be very similar when it comes to privacy as using an iOS device or using a Mac OS device, because Apple is pretty consistent across the board with their privacy and data collection practices, which is a lot better than other companies would do. So from that perspective, I think that in a lot of cases it would be, relatively speaking, more privacy friendly than like especially general smart
Vizio.
TV, like whatever's built into your TV. I definitely would never use. But compared to other streaming boxes like
Roku.
Roku or Android TV, or Google has a new Chromecast replacement. I don't know what they're calling it now. It's probably something dumb like Google Android TV OS because they can't have a consistent naming scheme. I think that with Apple TV, you pretty much know what you're getting into, or you can figure it out, and it's the same as your iPhone probably. So if you use your iPhone and you're fine with that, then I think that Apple TV is also just as good. And if
Yeah.
you think that Apple collects too much data and you wouldn't use either one, then I don't think Apple TV will be good for you, because all Apple products are pretty much the same,
Yeah.
is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think the way that's kind of in my head how I have kind of figured out where Apple lies compared in most areas compared to what the default is. Apple's slightly better than the default. And then there's like the privacy tools we talk about that are kind of just all the way up here. But there is no privacy friendly like TV box direct alternative to Apple TV unless you like get a Raspberry Pi or you have a NAS or something that you use with Plex or whatever, Jellyfin. Now you're getting more DIY. But I think of all of the things that you can just go to a Best Buy or like Amazon and just purchase off the shelf, you're probably not going to get much better than an Apple TV. And I do say that with regret because I wish there was better. But like Jonah said, it's just very predictable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely getting into more like home theater PC, Kodi, DIY situations if you want to go beyond that for TV stuff, which is fine for sure. But
Yeah, totally
yeah,
fine. Someone said thanks for posting the video the other day about real estate, maybe setting a land trust up for myself. I just wanted to say I'm really glad that interview was helpful. In my opinion, it's one of my favorite interviews I've ever done, just because it's something that's so rarely talked about outside of like what Michael Basil's talked about on his podcast. But I feel like there's just not a lot of discussion around real world privacy for people who have, like while I think reducing data collection is a really important goal for a lot of people in the community, what about, things like what the person said, like, how do I vote privately? That's something that like no one's really figured out. And I don't know if there is a way to do it legally, honestly. Because I think if that lawyer was on this stream that I interviewed for that, which you should totally check out, by the way, because there's a lot of interesting stuff there regarding like whether or not privacy tools are legal and what context they're legal. He'd probably say that you can't reasonably vote without giving like a residential address, at least legally speaking. But yeah, I just wanted to say I'm glad you enjoyed the video because it was one of my favorites. So also someone asked, Cheesium238, will Cake Wallet and by extension Henry be present in Monerotopia this year? Cake Wallet definitely will, and there is a history of many team members at Cake Wallet going to Monerotopia, so it's very possible. Will Jonah be going?
Will Techlore be going?
No, actually, they did reach out, actually. They reached out to Techlore, and they were like, hey, do you want to do media again for Monerotopia? And I said, well, no, because I'm going as through Cake Wallet because I'm doing marketing with them. So yeah, it's one of those areas where there's too much overlap, I think, to navigate that cleanly. So
where is it this year?
Mexico City again. So same as last year. And yeah, I was gonna say earlier, speaking of people who reached out, someone asked about SimpleX. It might have been like one of the first things we talked about. But when we listed SimpleX, their team reached out to us too, and they were like, "Oh, thanks a lot for listing us," and like we've been really waiting for it. So they were really happy about it. So it was really cool to kind of see. People are really excited about us listing SimpleX. I know you all really like it a lot. So
I wonder if you're on the SimpleX homepage.
If I'm not, I'm gonna wreak havoc. I'm gonna take back all the nice things I said. I'm gonna unlist them. I only list services that praise me.
That praise you in return.
Yes.
Right. Imagine.
Yeah. No. Unironically, I've seen some channels do that, and it's pretty embarrassing, I gotta say.
Oh yeah, that's right. That is true.
But yeah, I think that's all I got.
All right.
Yeah, this was a long one. So sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
We're trying to tidy things up. I think as we go, especially now that we have Techlorians, we have XMR chat, we have patrons, down the road, we might start doing, because over on Surveillance Report, we already do the Q&A for patrons only. So we're trying to experiment a little bit more with seeing, like, is that something we want to be a little bit more exclusive, but still live stream publicly so everybody can still see the questions and get the answers. But let us know what you think about that. We want to still offer perks to people who are supporting what we do. And we also want to make sure that we're prioritizing questions accordingly. And it's a really easy way to do all of those things. So let us know what you think. I really appreciate everybody leaving questions, especially Techlorians, patrons, people who gave us Monero. I appreciate everyone in the live chat keeping up. As you could tell, I was reading it as we were going through, so I was able to respond to a few things here and there. But that's all I got. I want to thank Jonah especially for always being here and giving his takes, and many of them I enjoy. I didn't dislike any of your takes this month.
Oh, great.
Any last words for you?
Nope. I think it's time to wrap this up. I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry too. It's lunchtime here, so it's definitely lunchtime for you. Have you not had lunch?
Yeah. It was like a small snack. I gotta finish it up.
Okay. Well, we're gonna go eat. Everyone, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in next month's live stream. Make sure to join Patreon and be a Techlorian and join our forum to get in on it early.